hoping this works. Okay, obviously these will be saved, so you guys can go back and watch it later if anybody who's missed a little bit of what's going on. So main reason why I'm doing this is so I don't blow up my program notes later. I don't want to write like a whole novel, so I figure this would be easier. I'll do this periodically as the time goes on, and as we get closer to the recital, I'll talk about more of the other pieces. So this is just a start. This is the first of, I guess, a series of live videos that I'll do. But one of the pieces I'm doing is a timpani piece. It's a multi-movement piece for 5 timpani. The piece is called Alcobaça Suite by Kevin Erickson, and it's a fun piece. It's a rewarding piece to do. I first heard this a couple years ago, and it just floored me. I've been wanting to do it ever since. Something I'm really focusing on with the recital is kind of I ask myself, not just what pieces what I like to do, but kind of what theme and what vision did I want to share that I felt would be the most appropriate. And a lot of it is kind of very reflective of my experience for the past 4 years. And not just that too, but I really wanted to touch on something that I feel like a lot of performers, especially in the music field, in a concert setting, I haven't seen a whole lot of this. I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, and I could just be completely just oblivious to it too. But I really wanted to touch on something that I felt was really important to me, and that was this idea of emotion. And obviously, a lot of music deals with having an emotional background to it. And something I felt that was really important to talk about, to emphasize, and to really put a spotlight on was the idea that, life isn't always this grand, fun experience. Sometimes it's really dark, it's really heavy, and there's a lot of different emotions that come with that. There's a lot of tragedy that's out there, and that's okay. Like, I really wanted to emphasize that different pieces that I'll do will emphasize a different human emotion that isn't exactly the happiest. And I think it's important to recognize that. I think a lot of the times we see too often, like, oh, like, you're not feeling that good, or you're upset, or you have anxiety, or you have this going on. Like, well, it'll be okay, and a lot of it just kind of gets swept under the rug. And I feel that it's important to share that, like, hey, like, we go through these experiences, we go through these emotions, and they're not always the happiest, and that's okay. Like, you are not any less of a human being because you deal with, some of these non-exuberant and not the happiest of feelings. And there's a way and there's a process to move on past that and to get over that and to be at a better spot. But when you're in that spot and you're in the thick of it, I feel like a lot of times we just go like, well, we feel this way because we're not worth it, because we're not enough, or that we deserve to feel this way, and that's never really the case. So this first piece I'm going to talk about, this timpani piece. I'm going to talk about the first movement, which is the Court at Alcobaça. And when I first heard this a couple years ago, it really spoke to me, and there's just kind of, and again, this is nowhere near the correct program notes or the reason why the composer and arranger wrote this piece. This is 100% my interpretation of it and how and what I see and what I feel as I play and hear this piece. And I'll play a little bit of it for you here at the end too. but there's something about this piece that's really sinister, and it's very dark, and every time I hear and play this piece, I've created this fictional character in my head, and so what's important about this piece and what this piece signifies is that like this is the embodiment of all that kind of nasty stuff that happens in our lives. And I'm not saying that we should take those negative experiences and act on it, but like we, I feel like we struggle, or at least I do sometimes, with this idea that with all this crap that's going on, how do we not let that affect us? How do I not let that affect my mindset and the way that I want to go about my day? And I just, again, want to put a spotlight on the idea that just because certain people feel that way, that doesn't mean that you're any less than, or that it's not important, or those feelings are invalid because they exist. And it starts out pretty much right away. I mean, you have this, you hear the main melody, this main motive of, and then right here, like there's just something about that half step and that progression that is just so, and again, the perfect word that I can think about is just sinister. There's just something about that sound that you just know that, like, something is affecting that mindset, that fictional character that I've created. Like, there's just something about that. When we get to that moment, there's the change. And again, when we get to that change, that's when really a lot of that nastiness kind of really is injected, and how this person goes about, their day-to-day activity. Everything about this character's drive comes from that manipulative, sinister, outright kind of evil mindset, and that continues throughout. And this character really struggles with that idea of being pulled into that negative mindset. And when you get to for me, what is the climax of that piece, where the character really churns and is kind of swallowed into that pit of nastiness, if you will. There's a section in this piece where it goes down the timpani, and it increases. It increases not necessarily the tempo, but the amount of notes that we hear inside each beat, and that constant, as everything kind of builds and grows and gets more, that's that kind of nastiness just pulling everything in. So I guess to make that make more sense, so you start with just your eighth notes. That whole section is really just that struggle and really losing that battle to all that I guess that sinister mindset. And by the time we come out of that, this character is in full-blown just evil. So again, just to kind of emphasize a little bit of what I'm talking about, into what's being played, you have this whole when we get to at that point, that's after all that struggle and all that kind of chaos, and once we're there, that's really just for me that physical interpretation of absolutely being swallowed by that pit, by all those thoughts and ideas, and just again, just that being under that mindset of that everything is kind of just nasty at that point. So that's a little bit of kind of what to, I guess, expect. Each piece has a very different emotional tie-in. So I don't want you guys to think that everything that's going to be played next semester is going to be this dark or this heavy or this nasty. They're all very different, but again, it's for the vision that, you know, these emotions, these this not happy way, it exists. It's out there, and I think too many times we just go, "Oh, you're not feeling okay. Oh, you're sad. We're just gonna sweep that under the rug, and you know, and it'll pass." And no one really kind of puts a lot of, I guess, emphasis on what it's like to be in that moment at that time. So yeah, go Dogs. I'm trying to figure out a way how to. I wish I had a remote so I could just be like click and